fine. That's what this shit's for. So
Shit says loading. Oh shit. Okay. It's a countdown. Are you ready?
And we're live.
We are live. Welcome to Little Pod That Could. We got
here
a
with the powerful
guest.
Kevin Turner.
Yeah, right, dude. Don't steal the Joe Rogan intro. Here with Bryan Bowman. We're back. We've got a lot to talk about today. A lot of cool stuff, and I've been doing a lot of the interview stuff, like interviewing successful people and talking about like serious stuff. So I'm excited to talk about Comedy
Someone
Central
who isn't
docs.
successful or doesn't.
Yeah, right, serious. Exactly. Talking to someone who's not doing anything cool. Yeah, right, dude. You just went to Austin. That's what I really want to talk about. I want to talk about the Austin trip, and so let me frame it there. Well, before we start, I wanted to give a free plug. No one pays to advertise on my podcast, so I decided I'm just going to start giving free plugs to cool businesses. So my friend Rodney, who is like the most loyal of listeners to the podcast as well, who actually has had like medical breakthroughs from the podcast. He owns a screen printing shop called DLH Screen Printing in Salem, and he does good stuff. So if you need screen printing stuff, you should go check him out.
Shout out Rodney, shout out DLH, and also disclaimer that nobody should be taking medical advice from this show.
And that's true. Well, no, it motivated him to go seek medical advice. But that is true. No one should take any medical advice from anything that we're doing. All right. So how I want to frame this. So we are eventually going to talk about the Comedy Store doc on Showtime. But I figured it'd be cooler for us to talk about your experience because it's way cooler. And so I want to be able to talk about you going to Austin to see Dave Chappelle and Friends. I've been super excited to talk to you about it all day. Like it was hard for me to not text you and be like, oh, tell me what happened. But I'm like, no, we got to save it for the pod. So anyway, so let's just start with Dave Chappelle is your favorite entertainer, correct? Like of all things, musicians, athlete, like if you could see someone doing their thing, you would pick Chappelle.
Yeah, he's right there with J. Cole, which my Spotify review said I was a 0.1% fan of. So no big deal.
Okay, all right.
But yeah, Chappelle for sure. He's just like, I don't know. Stand-up comedy is like the highest pedestal of entertainment for me because I've been funny in very sparse moments in the past. And so like I kind of get it, whereas music is like I have no clue how these people do what they do. So I don't know, for some reason stand-up just resonates more. And I've been listening to Chappelle for 20 years, since I was like 7 or 8 years old, probably, maybe even younger.
Like the Kill Him Softly.
The very first thing I saw him on was Blue Streak. You remember that movie? Martin Lawrence?
Yeah, Martin Lawrence. Yeah, come on, dude.
So good. I called that out during the show too. I was like, put them on the noodles when they're in the convenience store. Put your hands on the noodles. He didn't know nothing.
But like this guy.
All right. Well, I mean, he didn't really hear me because I was also scared because I didn't want to get kicked out of the show.
Yeah. Well, especially because you had such good seats, which we'll get to eventually. But yeah, and I kind of want to talk about too before we get there, like your history of stand-up, because I've been a huge stand-up fan my entire life. I've actually gone to quite a few shows, and I don't want to tell you what the best stand-up comedy show I ever saw was because it's kind of embarrassing, but I've been to a ton, and I think I got it from my mom. My mom she loved like Louis Anderson, who we've seen a couple times. We saw Dana Carvey live. She's went to Vegas and we saw George Wallace. I mean, I've seen a ton of people. And I was a huge Andrew Dice Clay fan back in the day, so it was cool. We'll kind of talk about that in the doc. But I was like I had this is how old I am. I had a 4 cassette tape series that he did at Dangerfield. It's called The Day the Laughter Died. And I just used to listen to it over and over and over again. So I've loved stand-up for a long time. What about you? You said you've been watching Chappelle for 20 years. Like, were you into other stand-ups too, or was it just kind of?
Not necessarily. It didn't really start as like a love of stand-up comedy per se. It was just like my dad was like kind of a stand-up in his own right, just at family gatherings and whatnot. And my uncle was similar. Like they're just really funny dudes who like tell stories. Like it was most like kind of a family of storytelling and funny storytelling and kind of just reckless off the wall, stuff being said and like life stories that you just wouldn't believe kind of thing. And so I was always a big comedy fan. Like I was a big Will Ferrell fan when I was younger. And like he was, like when Old School first came out, or Van Wilder's another one, Chappelle Show, that type of stuff. So I was a big comedy fan, and I watched Dave's stand up pretty early on, but I didn't watch I didn't really get into I didn't really get a love for stand up. So maybe 4 years ago or something like that. That's when I really went all in and was like, oh my gosh, there's so much content at that point that you could go. So I'm like going through all the George Carlin stuff, like there's he has 10 specials that are available to stream right now. But I watched like Chappelle and Kevin Hart. I saw like their stand-ups early on, I guess, but I didn't watch a ton of other people, I guess. It really wasn't until I was 21 and I could go see it live, because like just watching it or listening to it, I guess it just wasn't the same for me. So a little different history.
So you went to see Dave Chappelle this weekend, but how many comedy shows have you been to? A lot of comedy, stand-up comedy in person?
Yeah. So when I lived up in Portland for a couple of years, we went to quite a few. We'd go to Helium quite a bit, me and my friends, or me and my uncle. So I saw Mark Norman there. I can't remember this other dude's name who was hilarious. Whammy from Anchorman, the kind of bald dude.
Oh, Dave Koechner.
Yeah, Koechner, exactly. Saw him there. Brian Callen, quite a few other people, like pretty solid headliners at Helium. And
you see Rogan there?
No, I saw Rogan in Phoenix. Saw Burr in Phoenix too. So I
saw Rogan at Helium, and I saw Joey Diaz at Helium too.
Dude, so this summer I was supposed to see, like Netflix was having this comedy festival in Los Angeles. Oh, okay. Netflix is a joke kind of thing. And it was like a week long, and everyone that had a special, and all these people they had all these different venues. I was supposed to see Chappelle there. I was supposed to see Andrew Schultz film his special. At a door tour or whatever. I was going to see Joey in Portland, and those were like the ones I really wanted to check off, and all of them got canceled because of COVID. So I was just like, I was bummed when COVID hit and like all that stuff started getting canceled.
But COVID actually ends up leading to this, right? So, I mean, I had heard on Rogan. He had Donnell Rollins on, and then Chappelle just like dropped in for part of that pod. And they were talking about doing these sets at Stubbs Barbecue, right? And I was like, that's insane. They were saying it was like super intimate, 60 tables or something. I don't know, some small amount of tables. And thinking, man, that'd be insane to see that. So, but I didn't think anything of it. Like, I'm not going to go to Austin or whatever, but you did. So how did that whole thing come about?
So T-Lou hits me up on Instagram because Rogan had posted. T-Lou. Yeah, right. So Rogan had posted about doing 5 sets with Chappelle, and he sends me the post and he's like, dude, we got to go to this. So I didn't even know about it. And tickets went on sale the next day. And I was like, and I'm extremely impulsive. And so as soon as he sent it to me, I'm like, yeah, we can't miss this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So next day comes around, and I had 3 devices up. I had like my iPad, my phone, and my laptop going on 3 different dates for Rogan and Chappelle. And as soon as the clock hit time or whatever, I refreshed all the pages and tried to get a ticket. Sold out, everything. Because you're right, it was spot on. There were 60 tables, 10 shows total. So there's 600 tables available. You had to buy a table, and there was like 4, 6, or 8 seaters, and you had to buy the whole table. And I was like, motherfucker, just like I had everything going. I thought I had it. But I just kept refreshing, like I was like, maybe they'll trickle out or something. Maybe someone won't check out or whatever. 5 minutes goes by, I'm just clicking through each date. 10 minutes goes by, I'm just clicking through each date. All of a sudden it pops up and it's like 4-person table available. And I click it and I'm like, no shit, check out, gone. And that probably happened to me 3 or 4 more times. And then finally one popped up and I clicked it and it took me to check out. And it's like, you have 7 minutes to check out. And the timer starts up in the top corner. And I'm like shaking like a stripper. I'm so like nervous at this point. And I punch in all the information, click checkout, not approved, unauthorized. I'm like, I got 4 minutes at this point. I'm like, well, the date on the credit card, it wanted a 4-year date and it didn't specify in my credit card info. It auto-populated with 2. Somehow I noticed I punched in the 4-year date, got it. December 20th, Dave Chappelle and Friends. I didn't get the Rogan tickets, so it was Dave Chappelle and Friends. So I probably spent 5 hours worth of research just figuring out who's in Friends. I had a feeling it would be Donnell, but I was like, are we going to get Ian Edwards? Like, what else are we going to get here?
Right.
Or is he going to do like the music thing that he does sometimes where he like brings musicians on? And then I look at my confirmation and it says 4-person table, table 4. I'm like, all right, so we're table 4. Where's that? And I look and it's front and center to the stage.
That's incredible.
So every table was the same price. Everyone paid the same price. But it's like, especially once we got there and you saw like in the back, it was like, damn, I'd be pissed if I got that back table and the people up front paid the same price. I mean, I wouldn't be pissed, but it was just like, it was such an unbelievable experience.
But you literally had the
best Chappelle again.
Yeah. You literally had the best seat in the house.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like how far away from the stage from those guys were you?
We could put our feet on the stage.
Dang.
Yeah. And so they're like, and they got bright lights in their face, so they can't see very much, right?
Sure.
But they can see the people right around them. And what I noticed, because they teach you this in like public speaking, or if you're giving seminars or whatever, or lecturing teachers, you like talk to a person. You know, you don't speak into the abyss. And so that was one of the most surreal things about it is that, you know, as they're doing their bits, they're like looking at you and like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like they're like talking with you and you're like, yeah. It's like, I guess so. I even got a couple shout outs. I got a shout out from Donnell and Dave. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, here's a hot take for you.
Okay.
I listened to the Donnell and Dave podcast with Joe, and I was like, Donnell was just I felt like Donnell threw off the vibe, and he just kind of was like, I don't know. I don't think he's meant for, like, he comes off as great in podcasting, I guess, you know, like, plus, you know, you just want to hear more of Dave's, especially since he's never been on. I laughed more and probably harder at Donnell's set than I did Dave's.
Interesting.
He just crushed it. I mean, Dave was awesome too, but like Donnell's energy and like how physical he is and his like, his punchlines had just hit harder. Dave's is more like maybe a little more intellectual and like he just has his own style, and it was as good as I could have hoped for and ever imagined. But yeah, Donnell just he had probably a 15-minute bit all about WAP, the song. Yeah.
Okay.
Just smashed. At one point he uses the mic stand to emulate a mop, you know, like a bucket and a mop. And he just like drops it down and he's just like slinging it across the stage. And he pauses for a second, he sets it up and he goes, you know, ringing it out. And just the visual that they were able to get you into was unbelievable. And then the openers, I guess I should talk about the rest of it. So
yeah, I was going to say, like, so how long was the show, like, start to finish?
3.5 hours, 4 hours, maybe something like that. I don't know. Because
did you eat? Sorry, I want to get into that, but did you eat too?
Yeah. So they were serving brisket and barbecue and stuff.
How was it?
Stubs. It was fire.
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't the best I had while I was there because, of course, I was like trying to go to the best places. But
sure.
I mean, it was cool because like you show up, you get in line, you fill out your waivers because they did a rapid COVID test, so everyone got that thing shoved up their nose. And it's just kind of like a testament to 2020 in general and how shit's been going. It's like I wasn't really excited to see Dave until we passed the COVID test, which was like right before. It was like
just because you thought it wasn't a sure thing yet.
Yeah, like I thought it, Tyler thought it, my other buddy Scott thought it. We were all just like, we're all stoked, but at the same time, it's like I'm gonna fucking test positive.
Yeah, cautiously optimistic. Yeah,
it's like we knew we were front row. Like, this is what it's gonna be. It's gonna be me.
Yeah.
And so
you're gonna pass the COVID test, and then murder hornets are gonna get you before you get to the table.
Something, right?
Yeah.
So the lady comes back. We were like in this little gate awning thing. Like they put people in these different stalls, and the nurse would come around and stab everyone in the nose, which hurt. I've done a self-test before. Not too bad. Just like go till it like gets, I don't know, till you feel pressure and you spin on each side. This lady was just shoving it up people's noses. She didn't give a shit.
Did you see anybody not pass?
No.
Okay.
But I wasn't paying attention. Like I didn't give a fuck.
It would just be, that would be horrible to get all the way down there and then not pass. But anyway, okay, so sorry. You get stuff jammed up your nose. You pass the test.
So lady comes over and she's like, well, and she's kind of nervous. And I'm like, oh my God. She's like, and your whole group is negative. And it like took a second to set in, and everyone's just like, let's go, stay Chappelle. And then you lock you got to lock all your phones up. They use those little yonder pouches or whatever, which was actually pretty cool because like you're totally present, like there's no distraction. You're not worried about taking pictures. You're not worried about anything. And then the other side, which is equally as cool, is that the comedians are completely free. Like they're not worried about something they're going to say or their sets are going to get recorded or don't do this, but you know what I mean? None of that. And they went hard, hard. There were more hard R N words and hard R words drops in those sets than like anything I'd ever witnessed in my life. And which is just like, seems crazy for, it's like 2020 PC culture, but they went after it. Actually, the first comedian that went up, there were 5 openers in total, I guess, or 5 comedians before Dave. There's a Cypher Sounds, I think his name is, from Hot 97.
Oh yeah.
He was hosting.
Gosh, what was that? There was a show on True TV, Laugh Mobs, Laugh Tracks, and they'd like have stand-up comedians, and then they would be doing their bit, and then the show was that while they were telling the bit, they'd have like actors acting it out in a skit. Yeah, okay. Anyway,
okay. Yeah, I never saw it. He was funny, man. So he was hosting with this other dude, this Caribbean dude, and so they were kind of doing like almost like a live podcast, like bantering together, but then also doing crowd work. And then like DJ Trauma, I think his name is. So that's Dave's tour DJ. So like when you're chilling, he's up there like spinning records and whatnot. And then these 2 guys come out and they're kind of just doing crowd work, getting everyone warmed up. And it was so funny. They just instantly went to like the race stuff because there was like, he's like, I think it was all white people at the tables right in front. He's like, do we have any black people in Texas, or like just make all sorts of jokes like that. And and then they introduced the first comedian, and Stu comes on stage and he's like fully handicapped. He's in a wheelchair. I'm not sure like what his disability was or whatever. He was from Colorado, and he had kind of like a speech impediment, or he talked slower, and he had to like kind of wipe the drool off his face every now and then, and he just smashes. Like I'd never seen a like disabled comedian or handicap or whatever, and he just crushes. He had some.
What was his name?
Bits. I don't remember a couple of the openers' names.
I saw one guy on Last Comic Standing that was disabled. His name was Josh Blue, and he crushed too. Okay, but I think he was from Colorado too. That's what made me think. But okay, that wasn't him. Okay, but he was good.
He had a couple bits that I would love to retell, but like I just can't retell.
Sure.
It was just so funny.
Okay,
and then the other 2 dudes came back out, Cypher Sounds and the Caribbean dude opener. And then after that was Michelle Wolf.
Okay.
So she came on. She killed too. She was hilarious.
Yeah, I mean she was like the controversial. She went hard on Trump at one of the White House press. What are those?
Correspondence dinners.
Yeah. That's where she got huge. She blew up there because I mean, I didn't think she went like she was going hard at him, but I mean, that's kind of the point of that thing. And, you know, so I thought she was funny, but she crushed.
Yeah, dude, she crushed. I mean, it was super political. So some of the stuff like went over my head. Cause it was kind of a continuation of that White House Correspondents' Dinner. Like she talked about it specifically in the fallback and just making jokes, but yeah, dude, she was killing it. And then the two host dudes come back out, and then they introduce this guy. I can't remember his name. His first name was Omar. You actually kind of look like him, which is a compliment.
Okay.
He had this longer hair, just like bigger dude, and I thought he was Polynesian or something like that. Mm-hmm. And turns out he was Armenian, I want to say it was. I think so. But he was killing it, and he was making a bunch of jokes about how everyone thinks he's Mexican, you know, especially in Texas because he's from Texas. And he had a totally different style too. Like he just did this like run on, like long story. This is life in the pandemic. Okay, wear masks, don't wear masks, Clorox this. Okay, don't Clorox this. And like just kept going, you know, and it took like, he didn't have that normal like set up punchline laugh, you know, jokes per minute type of thing. It was like he killed it, but in like a different way where I wasn't sitting there howling laughing the whole time. I was just like kind of on the edge of my seat, like, that's funny, you know, like he just kept going.
Which is probably good though, like to have that change of pace in the middle of the show and not just have, you know, and really like Michelle bringing like more the political side. So it's kind of cool that they had these, you know, like not that you could see them all doing similar stuff and it'd be fine, but it's kind of cool that they had different vibes to what they were doing.
For sure. And I guess one of my favorite parts I forgot to mention, it was hilarious. So the first comedian, someone comes up and grabs him and he's rolling off stage, and the DJ, he probably requested this, I have to guess, but they played Roll Out by Ludacris as his walkout song.
Yeah. Nice.
So that's savage.
Nice.
So Omar dude does his thing, and then the hosts come back out, and then Donnell comes out, and Donnell probably did 45 minutes, something like that. You know, you don't know because you don't have your phone.
Sure.
But it felt long. And a lot of his stuff, he came out to WAP, and he's like holding it to like these white families, you know, like father, wife, you know, son's friend from college. It's like, sing it here. And he's just going off about it. Like, he just has a way of emphasizing words and like how he talks. Like he can just say, "But ass pussy," you know. And
did he talk about getting shot on there too?
No, he didn't.
Okay.
He talked about,
that was kind of weird on the pod.
It was kind of an ongoing thing.
Yeah. Okay.
You don't believe me?
That wasn't just me. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was super weird.
Yeah.
I mean, that was some of the stuff. Like it just kind of felt like he was detracted. And like when Dave was on, there was a YouTube comment about how Donnell is like the little kid in the room when the parents are trying to speak, you know, like just kind of like interrupted one. And I don't think it was that bad, but it definitely felt like that. And Dave was super cool because Dave was good about like bringing him in, you know, he knows Korean, right? Like getting him into the mix kind of thing. He
was kind of like that on Bert Kreischer's show, The Cabin too, where he just like, his personality just kind of like overtakes, you know, just who he is. Like he just overtakes.
I'm sure there's probably something about like filming too, you know, because like in this he was just, and I guess this is his world to stand up. He was just so good. And so he was talking about how he lived with Dave for like 3 months in Ohio, like doing sets out there and like just living with him. And so a lot of it was just about, he had this thing, he's like, from the streets to the creeks, from the hoods to the woods. You know, like, and had a bit about how like him and Talib Kweli learned to skip a rock together, you know, for the first time.
I think he may have done that on the podcast a little bit.
Oh, did he? He might have talked about it.
I think so. Yeah.
And I think he might be the king of like white people versus black people comedy.
Yeah.
That was like the crux of a lot of what he was doing, because he was talking about like, so where I got a shot out or something like that, because he was talking about learning to shoot a gun, and he just had this like really extra thing where he's like, bah! And he like turns and like shoots it to the side and like spin around, you know, and he would just do it periodically throughout the set. And every time it was just so funny. I'm just howling, laughing in my seat. Right. And probably on like the five or sixth time he does it, and I'm laughing, and probably louder than anyone in there. And he's like, looks at me, he's like, see this motherfucker right here? He's getting a little too excited at these gunshots or something like that. And I was in like a Carhartt shirt and jeans and boots. I was like, yeah, that's probably what I look like or something.
Yeah,
like
for
that.
sure.
Yeah, so that was funny. And again, it's just weird. It's like, oh, like Ashy Larry Donnell was like talking to me. I was just watching him on The Cabin kind of thing.
Right.
So that was a trip. Yeah, and then his WAP bits were hilarious. Like how white people shoot a gun versus how black people shoot a gun. It's like he crushed it. And yeah, and then the two host guys come out, and then Dave comes out. And Dave was just like, you could tell he had like a little gloss in his eyes. He was drinking on a Stella. He comes out and he like sets his pack of cigarettes on the stand, and he's just chain smoking the whole time, like he always does. The security guard actually came up before the show even started and warned us. He's like, just so you know, when the talent's on the stage, you have to wear your mask at all times unless you're eating or drinking, which was the rules anyway. So I didn't understand him making a point about that. And he's like, also, you might know, Dave smokes cigarettes while he's on stage. And so, he can kind of just ash them around. So just beware of that. And, in fact, he kind of flicked one out into the crowd once, and, you might get yourself a souvenir kind of thing. And yeah, so he's just like chain smoking his cigs, and he's telling his bits and stories and whatnot. And there's some like COVID stuff about how like we were all idiots for risking our lives to like just go see him do stand up. And but also how like that's the American spirit. Like this is the last frontier, we got to get out. And he did a lot of like trans humor too, which was like, but in a very delicate way. Dude, there was one moment where like the whole crowd went silent, real quiet, because he was telling a story about how one of his best stand-up friends was trans. And so like when Sticks and Stones came out and he got all that backlash, like that his friend had his back, and then they got a bunch of backlash and they killed themselves.
Dang. Yeah.
So the crowd's just like, and, but he's able to make like, and this is why he's my favorite entertainer of all time, is he says that like, what comedian drops my trans close friend killed themselves because of the media in a stand-up special or like in a stand-up set? It's like, it sets quite the tone for the set or whatever. And then just like right after that, he drops a joke, and I won't say it.
Yeah.
It was fucking funny. And he just kept firing and stuff like that. And one of my favorite parts was at one point he like flicks a cigarette off the stage, and he's up there talking, and then he pulls a pack of cigarettes out of his pocket. So he brought one up with him to set on the stand, and then he had a backup in his pocket too.
Nice.
He starts burning them down. But yeah, man, it was surreal. Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about the shout out. And I think it was right around those trans bits that he was doing and whatnot. He like dropped a line that it was hilarious. It was a funny joke, but like everyone was kind of quiet and not sure what to laugh or whatever. And meanwhile, I'm just like rocking back and forth like I was pretty much the entire night, especially from Donnell on. And he looks over at me and he's like, I can't repeat verbatim what he says.
Yeah.
He's like, see, I fuck with this guy right here, man. He didn't say guy,
Yeah.
And I was just like, he's like, like that's why we all do this for. Like, not everyone thought that was funny, but this guy's howling in his seat over there. Like, that's why we do this, or something like that. He even, I can't remember verbatim, but he was like, sounded like a Smurf, like makes fun of my laugh in the midst of it. And I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Dave Chappelle's talking to me right now, which is kind of a funny thing like to think about in general. Like he's just a dude, but still it was unbelievable. And he did the rest of his set and whatnot. And they like excused everyone. I looked over and that cigarette was still sitting there, and I was like, whoop, taking that home. So I'm gonna make a little like shadow box thing with like Dave Chappelle's cigarette, and then I got like the ticket, the wristband, sweatshirt, You get a Chappelle show or like a Chappelle face mask thing. That's kind of dope.
Oh, cool.
And then I got a picture in front of Stubbs, so I'm gonna frame all that up because it was just like, I'll never forget that. Even like afterwards, me and the homies, like we were just sitting out like at my buddy's place in Austin drinking and whatnot, and we were just like talking about the show, and it didn't feel real because it was like, I don't know. And it was a lot like Rogan said, where like really good stand up, they're just thinking for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I can't even remember any thoughts I had throughout the show. I was just like, you know, so locked in at what everyone was doing. It was amazing. And it was like a testament to like, this is why I love stand up. It's like, what pandemic, you know, everything had just kind of disappeared a little bit, even though I had a face mask on the whole time.
Sure.
And it felt like life was somewhat back to normal, new normal, whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
On a totally unrelated note, where is the best barbecue you had down there?
So this place called Salt Lick.
Okay.
That was amazing. And I didn't believe it at first because my buddy was like, I asked him, he's looked at
he
for
should
like
know the
years.
spots, right? Because he lives down there.
Right. And he's like, actually, Salt Lick, there's one in the airport. I'm like, I come to Texas and you're sending me to airport barbecue.
Yeah.
But I had to wait on, like, me and T-Lou met up at the airport. Like, we had our flights were close. So we sat there and had a beer. And, and we had some barbecue, and it was definitely the best. It was so good.
So there's multiple Salt Licks, but the one at the airport is the best.
So the other one's just outside of town. It's like 20 minutes out of town. So like I didn't have a car, so we weren't going to Uber there, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, Austin, have you been to Austin?
I haven't. Are you moving there?
I'm not going to because San Diego.
Yeah.
But I could, of anywhere else I've visited, I can see myself in Austin for sure. Like the
people in Austin are not going to want to hear that because they're pissed that everyone's moving there.
Yeah, they probably moved there too, so they can fuck off.
It's true. And honestly, San Diego might be nice in a couple of years with all these people leaving California. You know, you might have less traffic and, you know, maybe housing prices
we'll see.
Reasonable. We'll see.
Yeah. But like, I get it now with Austin. I'm like, okay, I can see why Rogan came. Like, there's like a bunch of different little neighborhood kind of like nightlife places, but also restaurants. And then the Colorado River runs like right through, and there's pretty much a trail that like is just beautiful both directions. So me and Tulu went for a run around that. Sick.
Now, is it,
dude, gas?
Is it
I thought
totally
it was
open?
Fake. You still have to wear it was like the restricted California or Oregon where you can go into restaurants, but you have to wear a mask if you're going to the bathroom. You can take it off once you sit at your table type stuff. People definitely give less fucks down there for sure though.
Sure.
Yeah. I remember one night we were out and we just went out to have some drinks, and you have to have a table. It's part of the COVID restrictions. If you're standing up, you have to wear a mask. And I guess like the only table opener, they decided to give us the table on the stage. So we're sitting behind the DJ at this place, and like people are up dancing and whatnot. And he's like, all right, we got to do a reset. Everyone back to your tables. Nobody moves.
Dang.
It just keeps going. It's like, all right, if you're standing up, you got to put a mask on. And like everyone just kind of looks around, and I'm like on the stage, like away from everyone with my mask on.
Yeah.
Like standing up, kind of grooving around, you know, and I'm like, glad I'm up here, you know. Like
for sure.
Yeah, it was a trip. Our first Uber ride, actually, I think it was to go to this place. We get in an Uber, leaving my buddy's place, and it's like, oh, we got a Ram 2500 picking us up as an Uber.
Yeah.
Like, all right. Of course, welcome to Texas. We get in, cowboy hat, flannel, jeans, full meal deal, right? Southern accent. So me and my buddy Scott hop in the back. Tyler hops in the front, and his backpack sitting on the front seat. And he picks it up. I'm like, oh, let me get that for you, buddy. He picks it up, moves it, and you hear cling, 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 cling. Like, what's in there? He's like, oh, I got some liquor for you if you guys want to get this Texas party started off right. And he had little disposable shot cups and liquor that he was pouring out for Like,
Nice.
I guess whoever was going out, he's like, yeah, welcome to Texas. Just throw it in the back when you're done. I was like, yeah, fuck recycling.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, so that was a classic way to start off Texas. He's also like, oh yeah, and you guys can wear a mask, don't wear a mask. I don't care. I already had COVID, so I'm not worried about it.
Dang.
All
right.
We're like, oh, really? He's like, yeah, it took me down for a good 3 weeks. I couldn't hardly move, about killed me, but I made it through. Like, jeez, this dude's a trip.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so
Jeez.
yeah, man, it was wild though. Austin was cool though.
Yeah.
Man.
So now off of that, let's transition into this, because I don't remember. It must have been like maybe like a month or so ago. I hit you up about it. And I was like, hey man, have you seen that Comedy Store doc on Showtime? And you were like, no, I haven't, but I'll check it out. And I was like, we definitely need to do a podcast about it. And I also want to talk about Rogan too at the end. I want to talk about how I think the pods jumped the shark. But let's do the Comedy Store first. Because I've been a huge fan of stand-up comedy for a long time. And so I thought the Comedy Store doc was awesome. And I really wanted you to watch it and just kind of get your take. It's 5 episodes, right? I think so. Yeah. And I don't really want to go episode by episode. I just kind of want to did you give me some just general takes you had watching the documentary?
One of my favorite things was, I've heard Rogan talk about the store for so many years now, that he's really kind of how I got introduced to it in a lot of ways. And then of course, shooting the breeze with comedians, and they're talking about their times at the store and all this type of stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. But my filter or my introduction to the store was through Joe. And the fact that there was an episode dedicated to him of the 5 episodes, right? One's dedicated. I don't know. I didn't think he was, there's a lot bigger stand-up comedians, he's got the podcast, but there's a lot bigger stand-up comedians. So to see the impact he had on the store, that they dedicated an episode to him. One of my other general impressions is it's very old school focused, Leno, Letterman, right?
That was actually one of the criticisms people about Mike Binder and his time at the Comedy Store, which I didn't think he inserted himself in it that much at all.
Yeah, I agree. Where I could tell it was his view of the store, which it makes sense. He's the director and the one who made it, so of course it's going to be his view or his vision of it. I don't know. I thought the criticism that they didn't do enough about modern comedians and what the store is like nowadays and stuff is pretty fair. There's a lot of big comedians that do time there that weren't involved at all, but it's also difficult to make a 5-hour or 5-episode docu-series on this that has 60 years or 70 years worth of history,
Yeah. Who did they say? Who did people feel got left out from the modern comics?
Well, so they had Annie Letterman, Whitney Cummings. It was both deserve it, but that was it from modern comics. I guess Bert and Santino kind of popped in,
but that's what I'm saying. I felt like they sort of profiled, which I did think was kind of weird that they just randomly. And then talked. It was fine. She's funny. I didn't understand exactly why but I felt they had Bobby Lee and Santino, and they were all part of the interview. They were the structure of the show. So I felt like they were getting highlighted in that. They were interviewing Bert, talking about what it meant for Joe Rogan to come back to the store. That's still, they're highlighting him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. So, I guess what I was thinking is that it kind of, I don't know. I guess it had to close, right? And the closing episode's all about Mitzi and whatnot. And it would have been cool to see well, this is how it's happening at the store right now, and have Tim Dillon blew up through there. I guess I'm a huge fan of his, so I'm biased in that regard. or Fortune Femster. Like I saw her at the store. So I went to the store just before the pandemic. Like,
Right.
and I saw Tom Green and Fortune Femster and a few other people, which was an awesome experience in and of itself. I had to get on the wait list. Like I didn't get tickets in time, like several days in advance. And I had to like just stand outside and hope that someone didn't show and I'd be able to get in. But I don't know. I thought it was phenomenally done. Like,
yeah.
But if I had to try and choose a criticism, it'd be like, well, I want to hear from. I guess you can't tell everyone's story. Like I didn't think it got a ton of like the background of what people's experiences were, besides the people that had already like come up, made it, and like kind of have the store in their rear view at this point.
Yeah, and like the Richard Pryor episode they kicked off with, like I'm not quite old enough for that. Like Richard Pryor was kind of he'd be like when I
am,
was
so
aware,
I'll educate you.
Huh? Yeah, right, dude.
I am, so I'll educate you.
You're definitely not old enough. But I caught him like when he would be like an aging NBA guy. Like he can't still put up 25 and 12 each night. But, every now and then he could still come out and give you something special. So I caught him at that. So I wasn't like a huge Richard Pryor fan. So some of that was all new to me. And I was like, I mean, I knew he had a huge impact. Obviously, people had talked about it, but I didn't really know like that much about him, other than he like overdosed. But it was cool to like hear people talk about him. But the episode I really liked, I think it was the third one, because the second one was more kind of about the strike, the comedy strike that they had there.
Let me guess, Kennison?
Yeah, for sure. Because those were my guys.
I was about to say that.
When I was really getting into stand-up, Dice, I mean, it was really Dice. Dice was massive, dude. Like, and they talked about it in the doc, but it was like, I mean, the first comedian that was literally selling out arenas. I remember it was like 20,000 seat arenas. That guy was like packing, and he was for a while, and it was crazy because he was super raunchy, but he was 100% in the mainstream. And I thought it was interesting because I remember when Ford Fairlane came out, his movie, it totally tanked, and I forgot that he had that huge controversy, and that's what stopped that movie from being such a huge. It's not very good. I mean, it's not great, but I mean, at that time, Dice was a force, and he was controversial, but he was really popular. Like all of the people my age and a little bit older all loved him, and like I remember we rented his specials on VHS and watched them at the house, and like I said, I had his cassette tapes, but I was a huge Dice fan. I liked Kennison too, but he was probably a little too smart for where I was at that time in my life. I was like, 13, it's probably somewhere 12, 13 in that range. And his, like, he was talking about relationships, and religion in this really, like, if you look at it, super smart way. And I don't think that resonated with me as much just because I wasn't probably in a place where I could really understand it. I do remember him dying, though, and remember being like, damn, that's crazy that happened. And that story is tense that guy tells. And then says, yeah, that'll be $40 at the end. But, like, in the moment, like, that was an incredible piece of, like, documentary film work. When that guy is telling that story, I was, like, gripped, dude. I was just so dialed into that piece of, I don't know, it was crazy. And then to find out that Sam Kinison went behind his back and like fathered his daughter, and like, I mean, sorry, spoiler alert if you're gonna watch that, damn, my bad. But like that story was intense, dude. It was like honestly probably one of the, I don't want to say coolest because it wasn't, the outcome's not cool, but like that guy was that story is incredible, and that guy did an amazing job of telling that story.
Yeah, that was one of my favorites too, because I didn't like Kennison and Dicer before my time, right? So it was like I knew of Kennison. I don't know that I had seen any of his stand-up at this point. Like before watching the documentary. I've heard Joe talk about him nonstop, of course. Sure. Like he always brings up Kennison as a huge influence of his.
Sure.
And then he talks about Dice, and I've consumed some of Dice's content because he puts out Instagrams and stuff, and the dude's hilarious, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I know him as like older man Dice,
Yeah,
doing his thing.
Grandpa
and so
Dice.
that was one of my favorites too, because like I had done some research and watched Richard Pryor stuff, and like I knew all the other guys, but Kinnison and Dice were the guys I like really didn't know much about.
I do want to shout out.
Who's the older dude with like the long hair who like talks kind of funny and he's a master joke writer?
Oh, Stephen Wright.
Stephen Wright. That was another one of my favorites.
I never got him.
He was hilarious to me.
I never got him. Like even in the talk, he like made a couple comments, and I was like, still don't get it. Still, because he was like the one-line zingers, and I don't know.
For me, it was just how uncomfortable he makes the conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
It cracks me up.
Yeah. I do want to actually shout out Damon Wayans, too, because I would, like, him and Sinbad, like, they both had HBO specials back in the day that I somehow recorded on VHS. And the Damon Wayans one, I must have watched probably 20 to 30 times. And it was like, you want to talk about inappropriate, dude. Did you ever watch In Living Color? Because it turned into a bit.
Yes.
Like one of his bits turned into, he had a disabled superhero called Handyman. I mean, it's like just the concept of it now. Like, and he did it into stand-up, and it was, I mean, you talk about canceled in 2020. Like, this guy. I mean.
Well, same thing with Fire Marshal Bill and Jim Carrey, right? Like, it started as a stand-up bit, and then.
Yes.
I didn't know that the Wayans brothers created In Living Color.
Yeah, dude. Keenan Ivory Wayans.
I knew that they were all in it, but
that was his baby. But Damon Wayans and Rogan's talked about it a couple times, and he never really. I remember watching that and going, "Wait, why is this guy more famous? Like, why isn't he like Eddie Murphy? Like, it was." His stand-up special, and I actually should look and see if it's on YouTube, and I can link it in the show notes. But it was probably the funniest thing I ever saw in person, stand-up wise, was Bill Cosby, which is crazy now. But I didn't want to say it at the beginning, so I said I was embarrassed because I took my mom one time for Mother's Day, and he was like I don't know 70 something. He sat down the entire time and just slayed. It was insane. But the funniest one I ever probably saw like on TV was easily Damon Wayans' comedy special. It was so good. And so anyway, I just want to highlight him because he's not really even like, I don't know if I think he does stand up sometimes, but he's not doing anything anymore. But that special was gold.
Yeah, that was another. I'd definitely say that'd be a highlight. Is like the duality of him and Jim Carrey, like coming up together and talking about each other. Also, just Jim Carrey in general, because I don't know. I was like a big Ace Ventura fan when I was younger. Like, it hit me right in that like childhood stage where it was like just goofy enough to be hysterical kind of thing. Yeah, and other stuff he had done. But like I didn't watch him live on In Living Color. I remember like family would talk about that, and I'd be like, oh, okay, and I'd like see it, and I'm like, okay, like it's funny, but like I don't know, it just didn't hit right at the same time, and so like, and also just how kind of like a little more odd he is these days, he's just like he's just a different. Even in the Showtime documentary, how he talks about stuff, he's just like a little more philosophical and like seems like deep. So yeah, it was just super interesting to see that and him talk about Damon and Damon talk about him.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say.
Him climbing in the piano, that was just wild.
Yeah, but that was one thing I noticed too, is that I felt like those two guys, when they were together, you could, like, their genuine friendship, like I could feel it in the doc, how much they actually really liked each other. And it felt like it almost made them back to, like back to when they were just like goofy at the store in their 20s. It's pretty cool. Yeah. Another take I had was that Eddie Griffin seemed like a dick.
Oh yeah.
When he was talking about bumping people for like, he would do 3 to 5 hour sets and just bump. And he was like, he didn't go, oh, yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that. None of that. He was just like, yeah, I did it. Like, I was like, this guy seems like kind of a dick.
Yeah, that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I was like, yeah, I'd agree with that take.
And then before we get to Rogan, the other one that I think is important to mention is Pauly Shore. Because I was in that time too. Like when he showed up on MTV, I remember everyone was like, what is this guy? Because he was doing the whole Weasel thing. But he did, because I saw all his movies too, but I didn't realize like the run he was having. Like he was a massive, massive movie star.
Which is pretty amazing to think of, because normally, like, your mom's Mitzi Shore, usually like the kids of extremely successful people aren't extremely successful themselves, but like, yeah, I mean, he was like, and that's a hell of a shadow to come up in. Ooh, the other one is like Freddie Prinze. Like learn about him. I didn't know a whole lot about him. So when they were talking about Freddie Prinze, that was super cool.
That was cool
because I know Freddie Prinze Jr.
Right. Yeah. See, I had a little bit of that, but I didn't know anything about Senior and sort of how all that ended. That was pretty intense too. I think it's in the second episode.
Pauly does a good job at like just talking about how like crazy his mom was, and she's hooking up with comics, and they're all doing drugs together and stuff. And his ability to like make jokes about that, like, yeah, I know what everyone's thinking, like, and he's able to get a laugh out of it too. Is like commendable. Yeah. I gained respect for him as a stand-up because I didn't know much of his stand-up.
Yeah, I didn't either. I kind of knew the MTV stuff and the movies, but yeah, it was cool. And again, like I said, I didn't realize like how much of a run that he had. I was like, whoa, yeah, he really did. And it's weird because like, yeah, I saw all those. I saw In the Army Now, and I saw Jury Duty, and I saw all these movies, but I guess I just didn't put together that he had this pretty incredible run as an actor. And I do kind of want to talk about Rogan in the context of this, and then we'll talk about how what the podcast is about. But I thought it was interesting that he kind of has become the new Carson. They talked about early on that Carson was sort of like the gatekeeper, that once you were on him, then that's really what blows you up. And now it kind of is Rogan, like –
I wouldn't say kind of. It is Rogan.
For sure.
I mean, I guess it kind of, in a sense of that, there's a lot more mini Rogans, right? There's like mini Carsons around. Like you could go on Your Mom's House and blow up, or you could go on plenty of other podcasts and kind of blow up. But Rogan is definitely like the pinnacle for people.
The best thing to do is probably to go on all of them. You know what I mean, and kind of make the rounds. Right. But yeah, you're right. Like I mean, still the biggest impact in moving the needle you're going to have is being on Rogan. And I think it's cool that he's so open, and he's like welcoming. And when he sees people that he thinks are talented, he like tries to figure out how he can help them, It's really, I don't know.
I feel like the difficulty with Rogan though, versus Carson is like Carson had a stand-up comedian every night. Right. Rogan's like, he's talking to scientists and he's talking to Bernie Sanders. And so it's like, and he's not doing a podcast every single day. So it's like, I feel like it's more difficult to like for people to get onto that platform, but it's available forever. Like plenty of people find out about Joe Rogan and then watch a bunch of his old stuff. So I don't know. It's better in that regard.
Yeah. Well, and I thought, the section the episode they did on Rogan, I think was actually my favorite because I kind of wish they had broken down the Mencia thing more. I guess they just figure you could watch it on YouTube if you want. But I mean, they didn't really, they kind of went hard at Mencia, but they didn't really Rogan was standing up for the other comics. You know what I mean? Like the other comics were all feeling that same way, but they were just afraid to say anything, and I thought, I don't know, I would have liked to have seen more of like the footage that Rogan that kind of blew up on YouTube of the actual confrontation. But I don't know. I thought, when Adam Egget was like, yeah, Joe bought the sound stuff for one of the rooms. Like, man, how cool is that? Like he really, I don't know. They say you should never meet your heroes, but like I think that guy actually does try to do good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's crazy that they sided for a while. The Comedy Store sided with Mencia just because he was the bigger name at the time. It's crazy.
I felt like it made sense to me, actually. I was like, that was kind of what I expected, because it's like, that's how it is nowadays. You tell the truth, and like, I'm not saying and that's a bit of a blanket statement, but like, it's really hard to tell the truth sometimes. And then you do,
For sure.
and you get screwed for it. You know, like you work in corporate America and you tell the truth, and they're like, it'd be easier for us to just get rid of you than actually listen to what you're saying, or, you know, whatever.
Jerry Maguire,
so
basically.
Right.
Yeah.
So it felt really symbolic for a lot of things, where it's like he tells the truth and he gets screwed over. Right. He gets kicked out. Most of the people turn their backs on him, or the club itself sides with Carlos Mencia. And this club is the gateway to all of Hollywood, which was another interesting thing about the doc to me. It's like, I didn't realize that the store was like the talent ground for Carson and movies and sitcoms and all that stuff. And, you know, and he gets shunned from it. But then, like, because of that, he starts the podcast, right? He's got to find another way to do something. And here's this media that nobody's listening to and nobody cares, but maybe it'll go somewhere. And now he's Carson times a million.
Right.
Right.
Well,
so it's just crazy how that comes full circle, just from like telling the truth and standing up for what you believe in.
And you're transitioning perfectly into let's talk about the podcast. The last note I did want to make on the Comedy Store, unless you have something, is that the music was really good. Like, I was like, it was good enough that I noticed, like, man, this song fits perfectly here. And the music in the whole pod, or in the whole documentary, gave me like, I felt I had to have like emotional moments in there. I was like, whoa, that was like a really well placed song. So that's my last take on the doc, unless you have other stuff you wanted to mention about it.
No, I'd agree with that. I didn't really notice it, but that's a good point. Yeah.
Well, if you go back and rewatch, you'll notice it more. Like right at the last song, when they're like showing all the pictures of people currently at the club and stuff, was like, oh man, it was so good. And the music, when they were telling the Sam Kinison story, there's just a lot of, I really thought the music was done well. So I don't know who did that, but props to you. Now let's get to a controversial topic. You and I have already talked about the fact that we're probably not going to agree on this. I think that Rogan's podcast has jumped the shark. Now, I'm saying this from a podcast that 100 people are going to listen to, and not 10 million or however many people listen to his podcast. But I feel like I can speak on this because I've been listening to Rogan probably, I thought it was 2007, but they said this podcast started in 2009. So I'm probably right around 2010-ish is when I started listening. So I've been in the podcast game so long that when I had to explain to people what a podcast was. So I feel like I can speak on this, and I'm going to make the case that the pod has jumped the shark. You, on the other hand, do not agree with that.
Not necessarily.
Okay. Do you want me to make the case?
Well, I want you to elaborate on what you mean by jump the shark, because I had to Google that the first time.
Which is surprising to me too. I thought there was but I feel like everyone always is like, what does jump the shark mean? So jumping the shark is basically like when Michael Scott leaves The Office. It's when a show or whatever, some piece of content it's like at its peak, and now it starts the downhill slide, where it's just not as good as it used to be.
Past its prime.
Yeah, it's past its prime. It's jumped the shark. I don't know where the term came from, but I just assumed most people knew that, but I'm glad you asked me to clarify, because there's probably people listening right now, what the hell is jumping the shark? So now you know it's past its prime. It's never going to be as good as it was. And now can I make the case for why I think that is?
Yeah, Jamie, pull up Jump the Shark.
Stupid. Your dog's looking at you like, is he talking to me? But, okay, so here's my thing. And I think it's a combination of stuff. It's because it started happening before the Spotify deal, but I do think the Spotify deal has enhanced it. I think once he started getting huge guests like Steven Tyler, like Bernie Sanders, like I can't even remember who else I noticed it with. he stopped. One of the things that made Rogan awesome was that he wasn't afraid to challenge people in a thoughtful way. Like, it wouldn't be like Fox News or, MSNBC where they're like trying to attack people. Like, he would say, well, wait a minute here, like, you're saying this, but like, it wasn't ever like a thing. It was more of, well, I don't agree with that. And let me tell you why. And it was a thoughtful dialogue. And I felt like as he sort of started to get bigger and bigger guests, he's been less and less willing to engage with people like that. Like when Bernie was on the show, he didn't ever like really push or challenge. It was more just like, oh, it's crazy that people think you're crazy and you're not crazy. It's like, okay, but like, let's challenge the policies. Let's ask the questions like, how specifically are you going to pay for this? Or how, you know what I mean? Like, ask the questions that people criticize. And I know he got some heat for when he had Jack Dorsey from Twitter on there, not being prepared for that. I wasn't as like fired up about that, but I just think in general, he's less willing to go to create thoughtful dialogue that is challenging. And I get the Spotify thing now makes it hard too, because, he's getting flack from people inside Spotify. The CEO has had to come out and defend Rogan because a lot of the people there think he's transphobic or whatever. And so they've had issues with that. So I can see him, he said, oh, well, once, even though I've done this deal with Spotify, the podcast isn't going to change. It's definitely changing. And I get it. If someone paid me a ton of money and I wanted to deliver and do good and make them money, I would have a hard time not being influenced by that as well. But it's like, the last pod he had with Alex Jones, he's like trying to fact check him like every single time. Like, you're not going to be able to do that, dude. This guy is going to throw out 7,000 statements in this podcast. If you're going to stop and try to fact check it, because he kept going, well, wait, hold on. Let's look at it. I'm like, dude, there's absolutely no way you're going to be able to fact check everything. You know what I mean? And it's like, but it felt to me like he was trying to be not politically correct, but he was trying to be like fair and not be misunderstood, because he knew it would be controversial.
He was trying to challenge him.
He wasn't trying to challenge him, though. You know what I mean? He wasn't trying to challenge him at all. He was trying to fact check, because he wasn't fact checking because I think you're trying to come at me like, oh, I'm going to challenge him. No, dude, he wasn't challenging. What he was trying to do was fact check so he could cover his bases, because he knew people would be upset that he had Alex Jones on to begin with. And so he was trying to be like, well, listen, let's not put out false information. Listen, but it's like, no, dude, like, you're not going to be able to do that. Like, that's not how Alex Jones works, because he's going to be like, there's this people over, and he's just going to go off on, and then aliens live among us, and there's just all, like, you can't do that, dude. Like, it's going to be impossible to fact check Alex Jones live. It's impossible. And I just felt like his conversations with Alex Jones before, he wouldn't say that. Just be like, dude, you're crazy. You know what I mean? Like, what you're saying right now is not able to be verified, and you're talking crazy. And then he would say, and this is why people have issues with you, where this time he was like, well, let's just fact check this and fact check this. And it just felt weird. And every time, sorry, I'm almost done. Every time he has these important people on now, I just feel like he's less and less willing to challenge their statements, their thinking. And I think it has made the podcast less interesting.
Fair enough. I disagree.
Okay.
I think, well, one, is all this publicity about the Spotify deal and Rogan having Alex Jones on, and internally at Spotify, they're so upset, and CEO has to come out and defend him and whatnot. Is that bad for Spotify?
No, it's not bad for, and I wouldn't make that case.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm not making that case. That's not the case I'm making.
Well, so I agree. So it's like, it's good for Spotify. They're getting all this publicity. They're getting even more people coming over to them probably.
Mm-hmm.
And because they're backing free speech essentially. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And most people agree with that. There's the like vocal minority of people who are like, oh, Joe Rogan, he's racist or sexist or misogynist or whatever, and we're going to cancel our Spotify subscriptions. But I feel like that's a very few number of people compared to the amount of publicity.
Yeah,
so I don't think
that's not the case I'm making at all.
Oh, I know. But what I'm saying is, like, because of that, I don't think Rogan feels any pressure to really like to censor himself or to, he's got to, you know, bring more money in for Spotify. Because more than anyone, he's been vocal over the years about how as soon as networks get their hands on creative control, they ruin stuff. And that's why his contract is a part of it is he maintains complete creative control. And I think it's worked out great for Spotify so far.
So here's the thing.
And so I think he's conscious more than anyone that he has to maintain creative control and do what he's always done to a certain degree. Now, I think he's matured over the years. I think he's just less confrontational in general. You know, like as you get older, you're not as confrontational. I think, and I don't think there's really like, you want him to challenge Bernie Sanders on public policy. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
I do. I want him to push back on, if Bernie Sanders says something crazy in the pod, I want him to challenge him like he has in the past. You know, I would have to listen to the specific episode, but I mean, I remember times in there like he was basically just cheerleading, and that's sort of what he does now when he has these big guests on. He just kind of cheerleads for them. I'm like, well, this isn't how he used to be, you know. And I think to the Spotify issue, it's not about like, I'm not saying, oh, people are canceling Spotify, but I'm saying like, I think because he is maintaining creative control, that's actually part of the problem, because he wants to, in the core of who he is, he wants to do a good job. He wants Spotify's deal to be beneficial to Spotify because they gave him a lot of money. Like, that makes sense. That's what good humans do. But because of that, it's changing. It has to. There's no way it cannot impact how he does the show. And I think
Bernie Sanders was before Spotify deal.
Right, exactly. And that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that that's why I'm saying that this started before the Spotify deal. The Spotify deal has just accelerated the pace.
See, I just like the Alex Jones thing. I had that feeling at first that you're talking about, where it's like, dude, just let Alex Jones be Alex Jones. Like, everyone knows, like, he's going to say a bunch of stuff that's not correct, but he's hilarious. He's a comedian in my mind. You know what I mean? Like, there's byproducts of him that aren't good, but he is hilarious to listen to. It's just entertainment like I've never heard before. Like episode 911 with Eddie Bravo and Alex Jones is one of the funniest things I've ever listened to, you know? And I think that it's Joe being a friend and knowing that if he just lets Alex go off, it's not going to be good for Alex, big picture. Whereas if he reels it in and fact checks stuff and he's like, look, see, my friend here isn't lying about all this. This is actually real. I think it's Joe being a better friend to Alex, knowing the platform rather than like trying to appease anyone. I think he's just trying to like do right by Alex, as Alex is like transitioning into a different phase of his life and career too. And they like talk about that some. So that was my take in hindsight on the Alex Jones thing, but I was kind of bummed because I really wanted Alex to just go off and Tim Dillon to chirp in with his, you know, cynical satire as well. And it definitely wasn't that, but I can see where Joe's like, all right, if I just let him go off, the media is going to go crazy. The Sandy Hook stuff's just going to come up even more again, which he knows that he messed up. And like, this guy's going to have a heart attack. Whereas like, if we go through and fact check everything, like, what are they going to come at him for? We tried to fact check every single thing, and most everything was based in truth kind of stuff.
Yeah, but that doesn't make Alex Jones look better because he tried to fact check and most of it was true. I'm not a huge Alex Jones fan to begin with. I obviously don't support him getting banned. And I think that, you know, people should be able to say their opinions, even if they're crazy, but you know, like, I don't know. To me, it didn't feel like, oh, well, he's trying to be a good friend. I just felt like he was trying to make sure that the pod didn't go off the rails. But it's like, when you have Alex Jones on the podcast, the pod's going off the rails. Like, that's
well, and it was also wasn't it in Sober October as well? So Joe's sober the whole time.
I don't remember.
I think it was. It was like right at the end because Alex was trying to get him to drink the whole time. And he's like, no, I'm not going to. He might have smoked a cigar. So I think that also probably played a factor where it's like sober mind Joe, like, oh, Alex is getting drunk. I got to keep him. That was my take. Yeah. I think there is like a.
Well, and I guess, I don't know.
It could be that way.
It's because I don't want to stick on the Alex Jones because it's not like those 2 episodes, like, oh, I mean, I felt like it's been a steady progression of this, like as the podcast, because I do feel like he's almost like, holy he's even said, it's like, I feel like it's a ride. I'm on a ride and I just am on the ride now. And I mean, it's gotten so big. I think that part of it is like, whoa, and it is sort of intimidating to be in the room with these massive, hugely famous people. And I don't know.
Right, like sitting and telling fart jokes with Red Band is a lot different than having Bernie Sanders come into the studio.
For sure. But I still feel like, like when Steven Crowder and those guys, like Ben Shapiro, when those guys would be on the podcast early on, and he took a ton of flack for having them on, but I felt like, listen, he's challenging these guys. Like when they say some wild stuff, he comes back and challenges them. And now it's like, as people say crazier and crazier things, he doesn't push back, and it feels like to me that you say he's maturing, and I don't. You say people get less confrontational as they get older. I think they get more confrontational as they get older. I mean, it's the idea of the old man, get off my lawn. Like people as they get older become more confrontational, less open to new ideas. So I don't think that's accurate to say that. But I mean, with him, I just feel like it would be really hard. I'm not faulting him. I'm just saying that I think the show has jumped the shark because of the situation he's in. It got way bigger than he ever expected it to be. And then Spotify paid him way more money than he would have ever expected the podcast to generate. And I think, he's learning on the fly, and it's just sort of warped what happens with the podcast. And I get it. I get what he's doing. I would be tempted to do the same thing, and I probably would, but that doesn't stop the fact that the show's jumped the shark.
I don't know. I think it's better. Well, disclaimer, I listen to it less than I ever have now.
100%. I haven't listened to an episode since he's moved to Spotify.
But I think it's just as good, if not better, than it's ever been. Because I mean, he can't challenge Bernie on public policy. I can't fault him for that, because I've listened to ones where he has certain like scientists on or something like that, something I'm more familiar with in like politics, and like he'll start to ask questions to try and understand physics or something like that, and he ends up kind of sounding like an idiot, and then like this extremely smart person has to really like simplify this idea down, and Joe's not really picking up on it, and it kind of just like goes like kind of detracts from the conversation, which I feel like could happen if he like is sitting there trying to challenge Bernie on public policy and stuff that he doesn't really know.
See, I don't.
Whereas when he just lets someone talk, right, the public can decide whether they're full of shit or not. Just let them talk, let them say their spiel, and if you disagree, that's fine. If you can find holes, that's fine. But maybe just giving Bernie more than 3 minutes to talk is going to be really useful.
But in the scenario you talked about where he like asks questions and doesn't quite understand it, that's good because he's asking the questions that you would ask or I would ask if we were there too. And when they have to simplify it and break it down, it's like now they're getting to the root of the information that's actually helpful for us. I thought like when he would explore in the conversations more was actually more helpful. Now when he just lets people talk, like how is he any different than Ryan Seacrest or some of these other guys that are just going to ask you questions and let you talk? Like, it's the same thing.
Well, because I think you have an hour to 3 hours worth of long form conversation. So you really start to like, I thought the Bernie podcast was great. It's like I thought it gave me a lot better idea of who Bernie really is versus the sound bites that you normally see. I thought the Tulsi podcast was great, or Andrew Yang, or Ben Shapiro. Like, I think all of them are great because I definitely don't agree with everything that they say or believe. Like, I disagree on a lot of stuff, but I'm like, it at least lets me see them as like human. And I think maintaining that, like, all right, well, like he might, because he'll still question them on things. Like, he asked Bernie how he was going to fund all this, or Andrew Yang how he's going to fund all of this and things like that. I mean, he doesn't go to that next tier of challenging. I agree with you on that. But I think it creates a relationship of like, all right, we're two friends talking. Like, it keeps that flowing versus they're used to having an interviewer who's trying to catch them, trying to challenge them. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of like a 60 Minutes interview or a CNN interview or something like that, they challenge in that way. Whereas when Joe's like, okay, all right, let's just keep going. Like, I think they're more apt to just keep talking and show themselves, I guess. And I think that's better than any, like, you know, hard challenge or confrontation that someone could.
But that's the thing. He didn't use to challenge hard. It would be like a thoughtful, like, well, how does, like, explain, you know what I mean? It was never confrontational in a way that was disrespectful and rude. I didn't feel like, I mean, but that was what made him better than everybody else, I felt, because he was willing to say, wait a minute here, hold on. This doesn't make sense to me. And he would he would ask, like, clarify this for me, because this seems like you're saying this, but that's not. I'm like, dude, that's exactly the type of questioning that doesn't happen. He was making.
I feel like he still does plenty of that. I feel like he still does that, though.
Not when he gets with the biggest people that he's ever had on the pod. It's not like that, and that's what I'm saying. And that's I'm not blaming him. I'm saying just a natural progression of when you get bigger. You know, in order to keep getting, you know, if he has Bernie Sanders on and then just crushes him on policy stuff, well, no one's ever going to come on the show again. So I get it. I'm not blaming him, but that doesn't change. I'm not saying Joe Rogan's doing a bad job. That's not the case I'm making. I'm making the case that the circumstances surrounding the podcast have caused it so much that the show has now jumped the shark. Like, it's impossible to put the genie back in the bottle. It's all I'm making. I'm not making a value judgment on Joe Rogan as a podcast host. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that the podcast has jumped the shark. It's never going to be as good as it was 4 or 5 years ago.
See, I disagree again, because like 4 or 5 years ago, Kanye wouldn't have come on his podcast. Bernie Sanders,
Kanye episode sucked.
Andrew Yang. It wasn't great, but it was like
it was terrible.
Interesting.
He never
once
said, this is crazy. Like, the things you're in, and it's all you can tell. Kanye is surrounded by yes men all the time. That, oh yeah, it's a great idea. So I wanted him at one point to be like, this is kind of nutso what you're saying. Like, I don't understand. But it was like, oh yeah, you're just misunderstood. You know, that was. I'm glad you brought that episode up. That was the one where it's like, okay, yes, completely jumped the shark, and that's fine. Again, I'm saying you and I are saying the same things. You're like, that was a great episode. No, it wasn't. But if you're looking for, I just want to hear Kanye talk for 3 hours, then yeah, the podcast is good. That's not what I think made, and it might be from when we started. I've been listening to Rogan for 10 years. Early on, he was definitely more into exploring topics and having thoughtful conversations, and that's not what the podcast is anymore. The podcast is what you're saying. Let's hear Kanye talk for 3 hours. It's not interesting.
Well, that's more interesting to me, because I stopped listening to Rogan probably a year or so ago, like, as much. You know, if I see a certain guest on, I'll check it out. Because it's like when you have those long form exploratory conversations, there's a lot of repetition about Joe. You know, like, there's the DMT joke, there's the have you seen the chimp, you know, with the spear joke. There's just a lot of stuff that Joe repeats. And that's part of the reason I started listening to it less, is like, all right, well, I'm just kind of like, I want to listen, you know, I'm going to check out some of these other podcasts and folks out there who I don't know everything about them. Like, I know a lot about Joe. And so when he talks more, it's like, well, I already know all this essentially. You know, I've already heard you talk about this 50 times. So that's why I think I don't know. I think it's better. And maybe that's for me because I'm tired of listening to Joe talk, but like, I think most people are like, we listen to Joe for the guest and not so much for Joe.
Yeah, I'm not listening to it for Joe either. I'm listening to for him to challenge people and like create like thoughtful conversations. Like, because sure, he'll talk about some similar stuff, but he'll ask people for whatever they're good at. He asks them like clarifying questions. That's interesting to me. Like, I don't care that Kanye thinks he's here to be the leader of the free world. Like, that doesn't interest me at all. And I would have much rather have him say, like, doesn't that seem sort of narcissistic that you, like, think you should be in charge of? Like, where is that coming? You know what I mean? Like, I would rather have had him be old school Joe and try to, like, look at that. Like, don't just take that at face value and be like, oh, okay, cool. Well, what else do you think? Like, I don't know. This is...
But we're all able to come to those conclusions anyways. Like, anyone who watches Kanye's episode is like, wow, this guy's like kind of off the rails a little bit, extremely narcissistic, pretty crazy. So like, I don't think Joe needs to ask him that, because it's already like, they make these things obvious by talking.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I didn't even watch all of the Kanye episode because I was just like,
me neither.
Cheerleading. And that's what I'm saying. Okay, I feel like you're making my point. You just said a year ago you stopped listening to it as much, and you're like, it's sort of like, that's the whole point. Like, the show jumped the shark.
I don't know, but like more than ever, there's like that sleep scientist guy he had on. I listened to that, or about breathing through your nose and
James.
sleep science, and then I got the guy's audiobook and I listened to that, and it's like, it's phenomenal. I'm gonna go get my deviated septum checked out and hopefully fixed and stop snoring and stop my sleep apnea, which is like exactly what you're talking about on how podcasts can change your life. So stuff like that, and Rhonda Patrick, or even.
But when was the last time she was on? She was on 3 years ago. Although she did do one on vitamin D. You're right. She just did one. Pandemic.
Tim Baker.
Yeah, the CIA guy. Yeah.
Mike Baker.
Mike Baker.
That's just interesting to me, to hear this guy talk about his fucking kids, Muggsy and Scooter, or whatever their names are. Tim Dillon is always a favorite of mine. I mean, Joe still introduces like new comedians, and I mean, he's how I heard of Tim Dillon